Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation, and Deputy Minister. Appreciate you being here. It is a shocking picture, and we understand the scope and the scale of this tsunami of economic damage. I just want to start by saying that I raised my children in the home of an artist in Hamilton. And in fact, in Hamilton, we have a huge, vibrant artist community, a music community. There's my ex-husband right there, Tom Wilson, a Juno winner, and they are innovating. They're coming up with ways to continue to have, you know, music events and to have arts events despite what we're facing. They're going online. But what I want to focus on is that the tourism industry supporting and the arts industry, there are organizations, small and large, and they're entrepreneurs, but they're individuals. And right now, I appreciate all the supports that you're putting in place, and the 5-year plan sounds fantastic, but right now we have individuals that are struggling to pay the rent, to keep the doors open, to stay in this industry, because as you know, and I know, it's not easy to raise a family in the arts industry. And so my question to you is, what direct supports is this government prepared to provide to individuals and businesses, direct supports that they can put money in their pockets to feed their families, to keep the rent open? You know, we've heard a lot from the Minister about deferred payments and deferred taxes, but what we need to know is what the Premier was, you know, famous for saying: we're going to put money in the pockets of the little guy, and that little guy could use some money in their pockets right now.
Yeah, actually, MPP Shaw, that's a great question, and I think you know, the culture industry certainly do play an important role within the tourism sector as well. As if you look at, for example, Canadian live music is an area Aaron Benjamin and I work with quite a bit to talk not only about the cultural side of it, but the actual business aspect. And you know, Graham Henderson of Music Canada often likes to say that every artist employs about 3 people. And so I think that's really important. So let me tell you what we're doing. I hope you'll check out, and we'll be launching it live, but I'm going to bigfoot my own announcement, Ontario.live. When you go to Ontario.live, we're providing an online digital space for content for creators such as your ex-husband and for others. And then we will also provide them with the ability to do online concerts. And so the ministry has partnered with a group called Music Together. We invested $150,000 directly into that organization to match funds that were raised through the music community in order to put on live concerts. And each person that is successful in their application, I want to call it Arts and Crafts is running this, yes. Arts and Crafts. Each person that's successful will receive $1,000 to be able to perform a concert from the safety of their own home. I've watched a few. I watched Maestro Fresh West, by the way. I have a 90s kid. And we're able to provide them with that $1,000, but we're also allowing them the ability to sell merchandise and take donations to get money in their pocket that way. The other part of that, yes. MPP Shaw, is that we instructed our agencies, Ontario Arts Council and the Ontario Creates, to get money out the door now. So that we can preserve and protect those artists that are working and need some support. Absolutely. We recognize that there has been a great deal of federal support through the wage subsidy and through the CERB and others, but we think it's important to continue to foster that creativity right now, because I think you and I would both agree we need something when we get through this.
Absolutely.
We need cultural institutions, tourism attractions to be left when we get through this. I agree. And so that's really important. Right. The final point on that is we changed the music fund to be called the Music Investment Fund, so that we would get matching dollars in there, so we could leverage our music fund to not only be a $7 million fund, to be a $14 million fund. And so that those applications have started this month, actually last month in May.
Thanks, Minister. Appreciate it. Because as you said, we want to have arts industry left standing after this. And we're 3 months in, and people are, you know, some of these businesses are folding, so I appreciate that investment. I want to talk about one of the largest calls that we're hearing is people are looking for a rent relief. They're looking for, really essentially, they're looking for a moratorium on commercial evictions. And there's a number of letters that I have here, and you've received them. There's a letter from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce that says that they would like to see a halt on residential evictions and to commercial tenants. There's a letter here signed by a number of folks to the Premier, so it's the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, it's the Restaurant Canada, Retail Council of Canada, who's saying that the #1 concern is rent payments, and they have in bold here, put in place temporary commercial eviction protections for tenants. And then you have a letter here signed by the Ontario BIA Association, Economic Developers Association, Tourism Industry Association of Ontario that you've mentioned, and they're also saying freeze rent evictions by passing legislation for a moratorium on commercial evictions. And finally, our own MPP, Catherine Fife, has called on this government to legislate eviction protection for eligible businesses, and that really we're strongly urging you on this side of the government to legislate eviction protections for Ontario businesses, because this is going to the economic renewal and the plans that you've just
Yeah, thank you very much, MPP Shaw. This is something obviously that hit us immediately in March, and I always think of my friend Glenn Shackleton of the Haunted Walks in Ottawa, being the first to raise it, I think, on our first telephone town hall, and he's actually the reason we changed the Tourism Development Fund to the Tourism Recovery Development Fund and tripled it, because some of these guys were losing their shirts as early as March. I can say, in working with the tourism industry, working with live music, working with the business improvement areas, and our restaurateurs, this is something we have heard loud and clear, which is why our finance minister, Minister Phillips, was working very hard with the federal government over the new program. Our Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister Clark, has been working with us on this as well. And I think the Premier was pretty clear yesterday that he is not going to see a collapse in these industries because landlords aren't playing ball. So if he has to take action, he has indicated that he will.
Thank you, Minister. So I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm so sorry for that because time is short. But we look forward to seeing not just tough talk, but actual legislation to protect residential tenants and commercial tenants. And I'm going to pass this to MPP Miller right now. Time runs so quickly. Yeah, sorry.
One of my favorite people. Where are you?
All right, we'll go to MPP Miller.
I think you're on mute.
MPP Miller, you're still muted, actually. Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, good morning.
Yes,
Good morning, Minister. Minister, my first question, we are currently at the beginning of the festival season here in Ontario, and as it stands, many, if not most, of these events have been canceled or postponed. It does not need to be spelled out to you how important these events are for our local communities and our shared cultural experiences. From Thunder Bay's Wake the Giant Music Festival to the Canadian National Exhibition to the Winona Peach Festival, the value of festivals and events in Ontario is immeasurable. A perfect example of the impact a festival can have within a community would be in Hamilton, Ontario, its own Super Crawl. Beginning as a one-day musical event, it became a week-long celebration that encompasses a large part of the city's downtown core. With over 250,000 attendees, last year Super Crawl has become not just the talk of the town, but a key element of Hamilton's identity. Just last year, Super Crawl was put in an awkward position of not receiving funding through the Celebrate Ontario grant. While the government eventually decided it was an oversight and the event was granted the funding, there was still some cause for concern that things may not have worked out. I've reached out to one of the organizers, Tim Patio, and he indicated that the live music sector will likely be one of the last to reopen and partially, and will certainly be at the last to reopen fully. This will have a long-term effect on our overall business, revenues, and growth. We believe within the current timelines that we will likely not be back to 2019 levels of business for approximately 2 years as we rebuild our organizations and the confidence needed in the marketplace to justify small and large gatherings. Hearing that response leads me to a two-part question. One, what is the government's response to aid event organizers so they can hang on until the storm has fully passed? Two, what is the government's plan to ensure that when people are again able to congregate in large numbers, that it will be done safely? From Tim's comments, it is clear that public confidence is just as important as any other element of our recovery plans.
Thanks very much, MPP Miller. It's great to see you. Glad you brought up Super Crawl, because if you hadn't, I would. We have decided to continue to flow money through Celebrate Ontario. We released $10 million last month, of which $100,000 did go to Super Crawl. You rightfully pointed out that last year there was an oversight. When I assumed the ministry, I recognized the value of Super Crawl and invested $250,000 into Super Crawl last year. And of course, I've kept in touch with them. I think you raise an important point. point, and this is, I think, something to the point that MPP Shaw brought up, which is at the end of the day, we need to make sure that these cultural events and attractions that drive tourism are there when we recover. As I mentioned, 2021 is going to be a marquee year, and I think Hamilton, Niagara region, I see Jenny Stevens up there as well. You guys have a lot of things going on. You've got the Grey Cup coming. You're going to have the Canada Games coming, and then on top of all of these existing events, it's going to be an exciting time for you, and we want to make sure we support that. In normal times, every dollar this ministry invests into a festival,
5 minutes.
we get $21 back. So it is a good investment for us. And just to finalize your point, MPP Miller, because it's very important, and I know you've been on the forefront leading workplace safety measures for some time, I'm working with Minister McNaughton on a daily basis so that when we come forward with these protocols, they will be the best in the country. And I had a call earlier today with Beth Potter, the president of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, about the world safety standards that we're going to start employing here. And so I think that's a really important question, because the behavioral changes, as I mentioned, as a result of this triple threat, are going to be the hardest for live music and our festivals as we move forward, and they are huge drivers of tourism in the province.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Minister. This is a perfect segue into my next question. As you may know, the 2020 Ontario Summer Games, with over 3,500 participants, are scheduled to begin July 31st, 2020. The event's website states, currently there is no recommendation to cancel or postpone the Games, as planned to begin on July 30th in London, Ontario. The website also states, the Games Organizing Committee is closely monitoring the developments related to COVID-19. The safety and well-being of all participants, volunteers, and event staff is the utmost priority for the Games Organizing Committee. Since they still have not been canceled, can we assume that these games will continue? If so, how is the government going to ensure the safety measures are in place? And the follow-up to that is, if they are canceled, are there any plans to redirect the funds allocated for those games and other canceled events, such as the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, to support local events that can move forward?
It would be tough to assume that they're going on, given I canceled them, but we canceled them, and the money will continue to flow, and they will take place in 2021 in London.
Thank you. Further questions?
This next question for the Minister. The federal government of $30 million for the Ontario, where is the province on this? We've got a question. The Ontario Tourism Industry has historically contributed about $5.1 billion in provincial tax revenue and roughly $1.4 billion to municipal tax revenues to our economy. Furthermore, tourism overall in Ontario represents $34.1 billion in annual receipts, which represents roughly 4.3% of our province's GDP. From the labor perspective, Statistics Canada reports that in 2018, 1,890,990 people in the province of Ontario worked in this overall tourism industry in sectors ranging from food, beverage to arts, entertainment, and recreation. The federal government recently announced that the tourism industry of Ontario, TIAO, will receive $30 million in Federal Development Ontario RRRF funding to provide financial relief to destination marketing organizations, DMOs, across Southern Ontario that we experience significant revenue shortfalls. Here in Ontario, the most recent assistance program for workers who have lost their jobs is an online portal offering laid off and unemployed workers online counseling, stress management, and mental health resources, immediate health and safety training, and technical skills training. Many of the people who worked in the tourism and hospitality industries live and work in remote parts of this province where opportunities are not in abundance. In many cases, tourism is the only game in town. The federal government clearly recognizes the importance of tourism in our province, and the numbers bear out what is at stake if more is not done. What is the government of Ontario willing to contribute to the vital industry beyond deferring costs for businesses and offering online assistance to those who have already had their livelihoods taken away from them, potentially forever? Who will cover the cost of living for people who are being retrained for uncharted new career paths? What are these people supposed to do for income? Government loans, OSAP, what do they do, Minister?
Thanks very much. For a lot to unpack there. So let me just start with, we are a $36 billion suite of sectors. We were set to announce that on the 12th of March with Beth Potter and talk about the economic impact that has had on our revenues within the province. We have flowed $200 million through a variety of those agencies that you had just mentioned. In addition, we've flowed $32.9 million to Destination Ontario, which is significantly, I think, more than what the federal government is, and we will be making further announcements as well. In addition, we fund the 13 regional tourism organizations across the province, and we provide, I believe it's, how much will we provide to the regional tourism organizations? We're just getting that figure, Mr. Miller will provide that to you. And then I think you raise another very important and valuable point with respect to rural communities.
All right, I apologize to cut you off, Minister. The time is up now. Okay. We have to move to the independents now. Before we do that, we have MPP Paul Clandra, who has joined us virtually. MPP Clandra, if you can confirm your attendance and if you're in Ontario. MPP Clandra?
Yes, I'm in Ontario in the legislative.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to the independent members now for their time of questioning. Who's going first? Please raise your hand. Who want to go first? MPP Hunter, yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation. And my question is around the budget that your ministry has. From 2019 to 2020 and the 2020-21 budget, there's a 2.1% decline of $35 million. Do you have plans to have these cuts reversed to the tourism sector, given the picture that you've just painted of the sector that was already hurting in some areas with some operators that need that focus and that boost, or whether regionally or in specific sectors that that affect tourism?
Thanks very much for the question. The ministry budget last year was $1.4 billion. It's seen a $200 million increase this year. It is at $1.6 billion. And as I indicated, we will be making future funding announcements given we're dealing with COVID-19, and they'll be done at the appropriate time. Obviously, we want to see what this committee comes out with with respect to its study. We will continue to work with our federal and municipal counterparts to see how we can best support these sectors, not just with financial issues, but as I said earlier, there may be regulatory initiatives that we can bring forward, and there may be some other challenges that we can help them overcome. One in particular I was about to mention is that doesn't come from my ministry, but it does come from infrastructure, is the $150 million to expand broadband throughout the province of Ontario, which is critically important for us as we move to a more digital environment, particularly in the near term, as most of our cultural attractions, whether that's the Toronto Symphony, whether that's the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, whether that is Science North in Sudbury, are moving to a digital platform in order to provide that content and provide a virtual tourism. But we're going to continue to support it. As I mentioned, Destination Ontario has a $32.9 million budget. They are continuing to work on marketing and research, and they have, as importantly, which I don't think you can put a monetary figure on, maintain their business-to-business relationships in some of our critical markets. At this time, we have been blessed as well to be able to work with some of the best minds in the country with respect to our airline industry, our hotel industries, our restaurant industries, tourism leaders, film and television production, to provide us with the most up-to-date, real-time information that they have internationally on how we are about to do this. So we remain committed to utilizing our allocation in the best possible way. As I did say, however, that this crisis has cut deeper than any other economic downturn in our lifetime, and it seems to be lasting longer. And so we want to make sure that the investments that we have are targeted and successful. And it's also why I've asked the ministry to turn their attention to three phases as we look toward economic recovery in this sector, which is the immediate term to support our local campaigns and our local businesses and our local attractions. Then in the more medium term, to look at destinations in the province where we could build staycations with domestic travelers. And then eventually in 2023 to 2024, when we expect airline capacity to be back up and running, hopefully a vaccine and a treatment, that we will be able to welcome visitors back to this province. So that was a great question, so thank you for it.
Further questions?
Yeah, and Chair, if you could just keep me unmuted, please. I appreciate that, but I'm a bit surprised that we have to wait for a vaccine, and I'm wondering about what type of expert advice are you providing to the sector around infectious control and new standards based on what is the present day reality, because operators are going to be asked to open in uncertain times, and will you be providing them with resources, programs, and support so that they can follow through on any new standards?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So just a couple of points on that I think that would be helpful for you. So if you go to ontario.ca/COVID-19, you will see that the Ministry of Labour has done these for over 100 different sectors. Many of the sectors that they started with were in hotel and hospitality and restaurants, as well as we're working with the airlines. We do have a panel with our airlines and airports that are based out of Ontario, so we are developing, or they're developing and letting us know what those protocols are. We go to a command center with the healthcare workers, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Labour. In addition, you're going to hear after me from Beth Potter, who's the president of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. She's working directly with the World Tourism Association, and they have provided guidelines just yesterday that Ontario is reviewing, and that is we're absolutely committed to making sure that happens and that we can provide our operators when it's safe to do so. But let me be perfectly clear, with the travel restrictions, I think you may have misheard me. With the travel restrictions right now at our borders and airline capacity losing 13 million seats in just this last few months. There are going to be some severe issues we're going to deal with the social impact on this. And so it would be naive to say when we have seen a diminished number of cases in Ontario that we will automatically see pre-COVID-19 levels of attendance at events. I think you have to really reflect on that, because right now, judging from the data that I've shared with you, particularly from Music Canada, live music, Canadian live music will also show you information, and I know Abacus has also come out with a significant amount of data, just to say that the social impact will take a long time to recover, which is why we're setting out 3 phases, which is why we're creating measurable timelines, and we will be nimble enough to deal with the reality. But make no mistake, I'm from Ottawa. I used to fly twice a week back and forth from the nation's capital to the provincial capital. Porter Airlines is shuttered. It's going to take a while for our airlines to get back up and running. Our hotel right now, if they were 13.5% capacity last month, I bet you they're probably at 3 or 4% capacity right now. And you'll hear from Terry Mundell and Colin Morrison, the co-chairs of our hoteliers committee, who will tell you the dire straits that they are in. So it's going to take some time, once we get these protocols in place, to, 1, make sure that these areas are safe to attend, and 2, I think it's going to require a significant marketing campaign on behalf of us in the industries to let people know that it's safe. And I'll give you one example. As I had the opportunity,
Minister, I think that you're certainly in recognition. The Canadian Hotel Association has said 250,000 workers are now laid off, 90% drop in revenue, and my real concern is the specifics around plans and funding to boost a sector that had already needed that boost. And the number that I gave you about the 2.1% decline in the budget for your ministry was taken from the FAO report, the economic forecast. I do want to just close my time. I'm going to be passing it on to my colleague, MPP Blais. with just a question about girls in sport, and we know how important it is that we boost girls' participation in sport. Are you considering recognizing cheerleading as a sport in Ontario? I know that my niece participated in cheering as a young girl, and it helped boost confidence and overall team participation. Is that something that you're looking at?
Not at the moment. We're right now focusing on COVID-19 and the healthcare crisis and the economic disaster that has befallen this sector. As I mentioned, $20 billion in economic activity has been lost. 350,000 to 400,000 jobs were decimated in the month of March alone. Right now, in terms of looking at sport, I was about to say before you had interjected that I'd just been out yesterday to the Canadian Sport, 2 days ago to the Canadian Sport Institute. We're the first jurisdiction in the country to bring back our Olympic athletes, but let me be perfectly clear. They are social distance. They are heavily medically sanitized. There are medical professionals on site, and we had the opportunity to see that. But again, it was one individual athlete, a female actually, who will represent Canada at the Olympics. So we are continuing to work on that and a safe return to sport. We don't know when that will be. We will take our guidance from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, but I think that moving forward, it's really important that we continue to deal with the COVID-19.
Speak one at a time, please?
Sorry, I think we have to deal with the COVID-19 crisis that's in front of us.
Yeah, MPP Hunter, further question?
Yeah, it's Stephen Blais is going to ask a question.
All right, MPP Stephen Blais.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for your presentation this morning. I recently did a roundtable with about a dozen travel agents from Orleans who are suffering greatly as a result of the travel restrictions and obviously the other elements of the COVID-19 crisis. In addition to an urgent need for rent relief to lower their overhead costs, they're wondering what supports the government might be able to provide for them. As you may know, travel agents account for 80 to 85% of all airline bookings. I'm sure you would agree that a strong airline industry will be critical to our tourism recovery. And so I'm wondering if you can articulate what the provincial government may do to support travel agents.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to actually speak to you offline about the findings that you had at your roundtable. It sounds very interesting. And I think they're consistent with the frustration about the rental issue in the province, and obviously with landlords who right now are not, I think, compassionate or empathetic with the situation. And so again, the Premier will have more to say on that. But I think it's important as well that this is an area of regulatory I guess, the regulatory oversight of the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. So I know Minister Thompson, I spoke with her yesterday on a number of issues, including economic growth within the tourism sector. She is committed to making sure that we work with those agents. We recognize how valuable they are for inbound and outbound airline customers. Our focus, however, at the moment has been working with our airline and airport ministerial advisory committee so that we can best assess how we can start to change those behaviors. And I know, having spoken with Air Canada last week, they're working hard to increase their standards. But I think if I look at what I'm being told, whether it's from them or Sunwing or Air Transit or Porter, that the challenge for them, I think, in the long run is the consumer behavior and whether or not people will want to get onto an airplane. As it was said to me by our co-chair, Laurie McKee from Toronto Pearson International Airport, you know, it's really hard to socially distance on an airplane and in an airport. That's not how they were built. So I'd be happy to have this conversation with you, MPP Blais. And as I also want to just say congratulations again. I know this is probably one of your first committee hearings as a new member of Provincial Parliament coming from our City of Ottawa. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. I also see MPP Schreiner, please, for next question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for joining us. I'll try to, time is limited, so I'm going to try to be very quick. I've had a number of large music festivals ask if there could be some sort of cancellation order for large summer events. because they are in contracts that subject them to significant penalties if they cancel these events without a government order requiring them to. I know I wrote you a letter about this on April 23rd, and I'm just wondering if the government would consider putting forward some type of order along those lines to save these festivals from those large financial penalties.
Thanks very much. Obviously, live music and those festivals contribute to a great part of our double bottom line in the ministry, where they both drive our cultural identity, but at the same time drive an economic bottom line. As I said, every dollar we invest into a festival, the economy gets $21 back, and of course lots of jobs. I will say this, in terms of cancellations, that has been done municipality by municipality, and I'll just give you two examples, MPP Schreiner. The City of Ottawa and the City of Toronto, our two largest cities, have issued a bylaw that suggests that there will not be any festivals large scale until the 31st of August. They may change that. We'll leave that to the municipalities to make those locally based decisions. I can tell you that on a day-to-day basis, we are making our decisions with the best medical advice possible from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, as well as the best labor and health and safety standards through the Ministry of Labor. And that's how we're proceeding. And as I said, I'm really hopeful that 2021 will be a marquee year for the province of Ontario with festivals and events that will really bring us back together when it's safe to do so.
So thank you, Minister. I just want to say that BC and Quebec have issued those kinds of orders to protect festivals, so it would be great if Ontario would consider it. I just want to quickly encourage you. I know a lot of restaurants and festivals are looking at expanding into patios, maybe parking lots, things like that. And if there are any, I know a lot of municipalities are working on that in terms of their municipal bylaws.
Sorry to cut you off, MPP Schreiner.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize to cut you off. We have to move to the government side for their time of questioning now. MPP Pacini. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Minister, thank you very much for speaking to us today. Minister, I have just two quick questions and a comment. My first question is, can you speak to some of the measures you've been taking? You mentioned a number of the committees and subcommittees that you've established. So I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a bit on that, what's been done to date, how it's informed your response to date. My second question is just on filming. Port Hope is home where my office is today to it, and Murdoch Mysteries. Filming occurs throughout my riding of Northumberland, Peterborough South. So I'm wondering if you can talk on measures the film sector said to me on how we can build up our studio capacity in Ontario. And finally, more of a comment, just, and I've long been saying this, for our public pools, I just want to differentiate between the roles for our spas in Northumberland, Peterborough South, and the extreme health and safety measures that they go through for the pools, and the role our spa sector will play in health and wellness in a post-COVID recovery. So just differentiating between public pools and those in spas. And again, thank you very much for the work you're doing, Minister.
Yeah, thank you very much, MP Piccini. It's good to see you. So let's first start with the 14 ministerial advisory committees we appointed. That we started informally meeting in February. By the 12th of March, I needed to formalize those tables because, simply put, we needed these experts around the table to help us fully understand what we were dealing with, given their vast international experience. I'll give you a few that are with respect to the this sector in particular, the tourism and hospitality and restaurant and food service sector. We have a table set up on hotels, accommodations and food service. We have one on tourism leaders, which is all the 13 regional tourism organizations across the province, so every region is represented. We have the Toronto Big Eight, which is the 8 largest cultural attractions in the province. It is led by Cameron Bailey, who is the co-head and artistic director of the Toronto International Film Festival. And we also have the airlines and airports, and we have a number of others that have been, festivals and attractions, as well as the agencies and attractions that I have within our ministry. They're all focused right now on building out their plans for their own sectors, but I've taken it one step further, and I've asked all of the co-chairs to join me on a multi-sectoral table, and they've had the opportunity to meet with our Premier, with our President of the Treasury Board, with our Conservation and Environment Minister, and our Municipal Affairs Minister, and our Natural Resources Ministry. So we've been able to get them to have the full scale of what a government is, and so rather than deal in isolation or in silos, we've been very comprehensive in bringing our leaders together in that sense. With respect to film and television, film and television is a great success story in the province of Ontario. It was a $1.9 billion industry last year, and our new numbers through Ontario Creates that we're tracking show that we grew that industry by $200 million, from $1.9 billion to $2.16 billion. The great news in that, too, is that it's domestic content. It's not the service industry coming in from the States. So I've made a commitment to the industry, and I have a film and television panel, and I think our tourism strategy should also include communities like yours where people will want to come and see the community where their favorite film was made in. We have made the commitment that we will streamline their tax credits. We started that work already, and that's a great success story from our film and television industry. We are going to continue to invest in Canadian content, which is why we've invested over $1 million, $3 million, I believe, into the Canadian Film Centre. We are committed to working with our unions like IATSE and NABET and others, and ACTRA, in order to ensure that we're developing above and below the line talent, which is something Ontario is known for when we deal with movie executives in New York and in Los Angeles. And finally, we are building our capacity. Right now, we have hundreds of film-friendly locations, and we're starting to build capacity. For example, Stratagem in Scarborough, or the Triborough Brothers in Nepean, and that's happening now. And that's something I can tell you, having met with the Motion Picture Association in the United States, a couple weeks ago, is something that they're very excited about. And then, just with respect, I know you've been a passionate advocate about the spas and the pools. Now, I'll just say this: as I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to go out to the Canadian Sport Institute of Ontario just the other day to make sure we could greenlight our Olympic athletes to go back to training. Unfortunately, we've not been able to, for Penny Alexiak, get the pool open. And so these are healthcare considerations that are being led by Dr. David Williams, our Chief Medical Officer of Health, in conjunction with the Ministry of Labour and with our ministry on a case-by-case basis where these arise. So there will be more to say about that, and it will be obviously something that we focus on both in the Cabinet but also at our Jobs and Recovery Committee
10 minutes.
When the time is right.
Thanks very much, Minister.
MP Roberts for next question.
Good morning, Minister. Thanks so much for your presentation. Obviously, over the past couple of years, we've seen some really great marketing of our hometown of Ottawa as a really fantastic tourist destination. A lot of the work that came out of Canada 150, bringing La Machine, having so many great festivals, Blues Fest, and all of our wonderful cultural festivals. And it's obviously going to be a very different summer for us in Ottawa this year than perhaps we had imagined. I'm just wondering what role you think the ministry can play in helping on the marketing side once we're able to start reopening slowly and safely and in a health conscious way. How can we help best market some of our amazing tourist destinations, obviously in Ottawa, where we're from, and right across the province?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. That's great. We have a number of people from Ottawa on our ministerial advisory committees, including Michael Crockett, who is the president and CEO of Ottawa Tourism. We know that our community is hard hit right now, losing $1 billion in revenues for our festivals and events and our tourism attractions. And I'm delighted that Nina Kressler, who is our president of our convention center, Mark Goody, who's the president and CEO of the Ontario OSEG group, Carolyn Pachinen, who's the president of our festivals network, Aaron Benjamin, who's the president of Canadian Live Music, and Colin Morrison, who is the head of the Greater Ottawa-Gatineau Hotel Association, are all helping inform the ministry. And so we have done a couple of challenges. One, obviously, We're continuing to work with Destination Ontario, who's here with me today, on a strategy with our regional tourism organizations like the City of Ottawa to build out that strategy. We will be contributing significant marketing dollars on a go-forward basis to make sure that they are adequately supported. We have continued to flow money to them, and so that money will start to flow very shortly. And we're excited that the new ideas, and a lot of this is really some of the most exciting proposals are coming from our creators on how to rebuild tourism, like Blues Fest in Ottawa, for example, talking about a drive-in concert. How do we support them on a go-forward basis? And then you raise, I think, probably one of the biggest points, and I think MPP Shaw raised it earlier too, and I think MPP Hunter, is how do you deal with the safety issue? And so I think when I was referring to this triple threat, we have the public health crisis ongoing right now. We're in an economic crisis, but the social crisis that we're going to have to deal with is making sure after 4 months of telling everyone to social distance that when it's safe to do so, we're going to actually have to encourage them to come back out and go to the farmer's market. We're going to have to encourage them to come back out and go to a concert when it's safe to do so. So the marketing strategy I see is probably going to be twofold. One, when it's safe to do so, communicating how to do it safely. And then the second part is to actually talk and extol the virtues of going to the nation's capital, or going back to Niagara Falls, or going to Muskoka, or going to Blue Mountain, or going to Kenora, or coming to Toronto. And I think that that's going to be a twofold plan that we're going to have to engage. And I'd be interested, actually, hearing from all of you from different parts of Ontario, how we can best support you in that endeavor. And then again, I'll just say right now, if you could go to ontario.live and have your local communities fill some content and support this ability for us to showcase the best of Ontario across Ontario. I think that's going to be very critical as well. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to MPP Crawford for next question.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation. And you know, it's a very interesting presentation. I know you have a great job in the sense that your job is really to promote Ontario and the beauty of our province, both internally and externally to people outside of the province, outside of, in fact, outside of the country. And obviously, it's a very tough job now, just given that the province and the world have been so affected by COVID. So my question is, what kind of trajectory was the tourism sector on before COVID hit? And what do you think it'll take to get back on track? And do you have confidence that the province of Ontario will surpass the 2019 tourism numbers in the future?
5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, MPP Crawford, and thank you for chairing one of my regional roundtables. I'm grateful for you for that. Look, where were we? On the 12th of March, we were set, myself and Beth Potter and Lisa Lavecchia, who is our president and CEO of Destination Ontario, one of our agencies, we were set to go to Ripley's Aquarium. We were going to announce that a $34 billion sector in the province of Ontario had grown to $36 billion. And that morning, that's very bittersweet when you think about the numbers we were about to announce and the fact that that day we were canceling the Raptors, we were canceling my daughter's hockey team, we were going to be the ultimate tourist coming to Toronto, and all those hotels that we were working at almost overnight collapsed. Can you imagine the irony, the bittersweetness of having that great number to announce and then on that very day that happening? And that was a turning point for me. I mentioned it in my remarks. It is going to take a while to get Ontario back. I think we have a three-pronged approach we're going to have to take. One is to start getting people, when it's safe to do so, back to their farmers markets, going to smaller events when it's safe to do so. Then we go into the more medium term, which I hope is not too long down the road, which is where we're going to start to see these staycations and domestic travel. And I'll leave that to Destination Ontario and Destination Canada and our RTOs to really flesh out. And then it's the longer term. And if I, read correctly what I'm hearing from our airline partners, what I'm hearing from the hotel industries, it's going to be a few years out before consumer changes. That social crisis I'm talking about that is going to inhibit some of this travel will subside. And we're projecting within the ministry, and of course this can change because it's the situation is very fluid. We're expecting 2023 to 2024 being a time when we may get back to that $36 billion. But I want to leave you with this, MPP Crawford. and I mentioned it like in my remarks, but it's so important. My friend Tony, who works in the ministry, said to me, when all other industries fail, we always had tourism. And right now, the hardest hit, the one that's going to take the longest to recover, is going to be tourism. And so it's going to be very important across the province. And by the way, we're in every single town, village, and city to support these industries. And it's going to take a massive push from government, but it's also going to take a massive push from everyday Ontarians.
Thank you. We'll go to MPP Skelly for next question.
Good morning, Minister, and thank you for your presentation. I have one question for you. To the restaurant owners, all of those small business entrepreneurs who've worked so hard to build up a business and are now facing this devastation through COVID-19, what are you doing? What is our government doing? And what can they do to somehow survive through COVID-19?
Yeah, great idea. I think the first thing we did, obviously, was to liberalize some alcohol laws so that they would have a fighting chance in the early days to deliver unopened alcohol. I would encourage all members of this committee to look at other regulatory changes we may be able to make that would further allow these businesses to prosper, or I should say at the immediate term to survive and then to prosper. I think that MPP Schreiner made a good point about patios. This is something I know MPP Lamar has been talking about. We are certainly ready to entertain that type of idea. I think that there's, we're going to have to continue to put pressure on landlords, but they're also doing something different. Like in my constituency in Nepean, where I live in my neighborhood, I live about 2 kilometers. I walk to work sometimes, and Fitz. My buddy Fitzroy has a little restaurant called Fitz's, and he does wings and he does ribs. And he actually had like a little festival. He brought out the truck, and we all went to his restaurant, and he had a good weekend. And so I think that as long as we can start encouraging innovation, I think the way we did things on the 11th of March, if they ever come back, it won't be for any time soon. So I think I would challenge all members here just to tell me what would work in your community in terms of not just the commercial rent issue and not just some liberalization of maybe some alcohol rules, but how else can we help? We're all ears. I do not have a monopoly on all the ideas, and I know certainly with this legislature and over 100 of us together, I'm sure we can come up with some fairly good ideas that will support these sectors.
Thank you, Minister. Further questions? MPP Rashid.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Minister, for your presentation. Because I only have 45 seconds left, I just wanted to know about the airline industry. I know you had several conversations with the executives of airline industry, the impact on the tourism as well, too. If you just want to elaborate your conversation with the airline industry.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's important, obviously. We have the largest airport in the country right outside.
Thank you, Minister. Sorry, apologies to cut you off.
You seem to enjoy it, though.
Thank you so much for appearing before the committee, and thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much.